Now for business updates across the globe, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, all of you. Gosh, so much to discuss today. Let's quickly get through it. Asian stocks continue to see weakness from China. Korea has returned from their liberation holiday, and the Kospi was down. So the mixed trading, of course, is still because we are seeing data from China. I don't know. I think China might actually be, if they're not, there's something called a growth recession, where your economy is still growing. But I think I even mentioned this yesterday. The metrics show that things are just weak. China's new home prices fell for the first time in a year, month on month, minus 0.2%. For June, it was flat. So there wasn't even any growth on a year-on-year basis in the prior month. Year-on-year, that is from July, 0.1%. Now, this is Kai Fang. Kai Fang is a member of the People's Bank of China's Monetary Policy Committee. He wrote in a blog that was translated to English. The most urgent goal now is to stimulate household consumption, and it is necessary to use all reasonable, legally compliant, and economic channels to put money in residents' pockets. Li Qiang a year ago said that China doesn't want to go into a welfare state. They don't want to go into welfareism and put money in pockets. They have suggested that, and this is very key for Nigeria with our conversations around palliatives and cash transfers. They're saying it is better to cut taxes and look for other ways to provide stimulus to people. So the debate rages on. China is hesitant to put money in people's pockets. And it is showing, I mean, you just continue to see this debate raging on. What else from China? JP Morgan, this is their emerging market corporate high yield default forecast. That is the potential, the chances of high yield debt defaulting in the next year or so. They've raised it globally from 6% to 9.7%. Asia, high yield default 10% from 4.1%. Interestingly enough, if you back out China's real estate sector, that comes down to about 1%. So China is majority of this. There's China property to account for 40% of defaults according to JP Morgan. Russia corporates 35%. We saw Russia raise their benchmark rate yesterday in emergency because the ruble has been falling. Wall Street banks continue to downgrade China. JP Morgan has downgraded China, and I think this is the third or fourth downgrade. They're now down to 4.8%. Prior growth forecast was 5.5%. Barclays has downgraded them 4.5%. Prior was 4.9%. Mizuho was 5%. Prior was 5.5%. Again, weakness. I remember China is supposed to try and get to 5% growth this year. I think 3 years in a row now, they haven't made it. China grew up 3.3% last year or so. So 3 years in a row, they have not been able to meet that 5% target. We come to Argentina, and their inflation month on month, 6.3%. For June, that's July. June, it was 6%. Year on year, 113%. The climb in prices for the first 7 months of the year in Argentina, 60.2%. You can imagine being in that kind of price environment. Now, the interesting thing is that yesterday we talked about the fact that Argentina devalued their currency by about 18 to 20% to 350 pesos to the dollar. And they also hiked their benchmark interest rate. These inflation figures do not account for that. So that pass-through effect, and like you are here in Nigeria, our own is devalue left and right. The pass-through impact of currency depreciation and devaluation on inflation is heavy. So watch for Argentina's numbers to increase. That's why Javier Miel is so proper. You folks were talking about fuel prices and not raising them. I thought that was a very interesting conversation coming from your side. Brazil is raising fuel prices. Petrobras, the state-owned oil company, which is the equivalent of oil, what was NNPC before NNPC became a limited liability company, says abrupt increase in global oil prices. And again, you folks keep talking about refineries. Brazil produces more crude oil than Nigeria. Brazil has refineries, and yet they are raising prices. Petrol prices to rise by 16% per liter, diesel to rise by 25% per liter. And get this, I had to include this part. The moment the market heard that Petrobras was increasing fuel prices, their share price jumped by 5%, because when your market is deregulated, you are supposed to move according to market forces. That was what the markets did when we, quote unquote, deregulated. Anyway, we'll get to Nigeria's nonsense in a few minutes. Also, we keep going. UK inflation just came out not too long ago. Bank of England is still under pressure here. Headline inflation, 6.8%. Headline for June was 7.9%. Core inflation, which is what they're really looking at, 6.9%. And we included the Bank of England headline target of 2%, way above. They probably have to hike again. So those are the latest numbers just coming out from the UK. US retail sales, this came out yesterday. They beat forecasts. And it's funny, the markets actually fell. If you think about it intuitively, US retail consumers are about, what, 60-70% of the US economy. So it is spending that pushes the US economy forward, consumer spending. So if retailers, hold on, producer, we'll get to Ghana in a second. If retailers in the United States are beating forecasts of spending, that means that wage inflation is still climbing, and that means that the US Federal Reserve still probably has to hike. Now let's get to Africa and let's get to Ghana. Ghana is raising fuel prices as well. Datanomics, effective Wednesday, August the 16th, 2023, petroleum products will see an adjustment of 5.7%. Petrol will be at 12.9 cedis, diesel at 13.4. This means the price of petrol and diesel has at least 13.2 cedis, while LPG will go for 23 per kilogram. And they said brace up. This is according to the COPEC, which is the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. So it is really not a good example to be citing William Ruto. I said here yesterday that Kenya has property taxes. Kenya has fuel taxes. Kenya also got money from the IMF. So Kenya has room to move money around from where they're collecting taxes to subsidize fuel. Also, William Ruto has been in power now for what, 6-7 months? He removed fuel subsidies immediately he came into office and they were gone. This 1 month, you can account for that. Also, Kenya has about what, 50 million people? That's Lagos, Kano, and maybe 1 or 2 other states. So Nigeria is not spending as much money on subsidies as Kenya is. So Kenya is a bad example. We keep on going. I'm still in Nigeria now. Year-on-year inflation, we continue to see a squeeze. Headline, 24%. Look at food inflation. Food inflation in Nigeria now, and by the way, that basket still needs to be rejigged. Almost 27% if you want to approximate. We're inching towards 30%. Look at core inflation when you strip out the more volatile items. 20% across the board. Urban, rural. Look at month on month. It's even more alarming. Food inflation jumped to 3.45%. From 2.8, headlines 2.89, look at that, 3.45 from 2.4. Core 2.1, urban 3.05, 2.7. So we're still seeing heavy price pressure in Nigeria. So now let's get to this fuel matter. I noticed a lot of folks were talking about this when this tweets. This notice is from NNPC Retail. NNPC Retail is the retail arm of a limited liability company that is in a for-profit downstream sector. They can do what they want if they want to reduce, if they don't want to raise prices. So it says, look at the language. Please, you have to really brace and cut this down. Dear esteemed customers, we at NNPC Retail value your patronage, and we do not have the intention to increase our PMS pump prices as widely speculated. Please buy the best quality products at the most affordable prices at our NNPC retail stations. I walked over to a competitor of NNPC Retail and I asked them just yesterday, I casually asked them, I said, hey, are you guys raising prices? I won't mention the name. He said, yeah, we're raising prices. I said, when is it going to happen? He said, it's either this week or next week. I said, what's the price? He said, 720 naira per liter. If you are in a deregulated market, if you want, you can sell. It's like living in a neighborhood. We're all neighbors here, and they are selling this phone for. Let me not use this phone as an example. We're selling chewing gum for 200 naira for a pack of gum. The same gum. If we're all in the market, I can choose to sell at 50 naira, while Doctor sells at 200, Ayo sells at 250, Lufai sells at 300. That's my business. It's my profit margins that will be impacted. But so no one should take that as a government stance. So get this now. I've spoken to a retailer in the downstream space. They say they are raising prices. Why? Because of the same thing Petrobras talked about, which is global prices rising, right? Ghana is also raising prices. Now look at this tweets. I think we have this tweet from senior advisor to the president. I think it's on media or something. Temitope Ajayi. He said there is no plan to reintroduce any form of fuel subsidy. This is Nigeria now. There is no condition to support any increase in prices at this time. President Tinubu is convinced, based on information before him, that we can maintain current pricing without reversing the current deregulation policy by swiftly cleaning up existing inefficiencies within the midstream and downstream sector. It's almost as if Mr. Ajayi thinks he's talking to children. the particular sentence there that says there is no condition to support any increase in prices at this time flies in the face of the fundamentals around fuel prices increasing. Petrobras said global oil prices are rising abruptly, and that is why they are raising prices. So my take on this reversal, well, okay, fine, let's even get to Mr. Ngelali and this particular part where he's looking at, he's comparing prices across Africa.
What you will find is the present cost of refined petroleum motor spirit at the pump in each of the West African nations that neighbor us. And I'll just name some, for example, even as I know you'll be showing your audiences the graphics which the president has graciously approved for public release today. Senegal at pump price today of 1,273 naira equivalent per liter. Guinea at 1,075 naira per liter. Cote d'Ivoire at 1,048 naira per liter equivalent in their currency. Mali, 1,113 naira per liter. Central African Republic, 1,414 per liter. Nigeria is presently averaging between 568 and 630 naira per liter. We are presently the cheapest, most affordable purchasing state in the West African sub-region by some distance. There's no country that is below 700 naira per liter. So this is the backdrop. We have seen.
That is incredible. I came up with this chart. We discussed this chart a month ago. I think we have that chart back in June. This was the chart. The moment when fuel prices are removed, I showed us this chart. And I made the case that if you multiply at the time the exchange rate times where fuel prices were, Nigeria is still one of the lowest in the world, even with the deregulation. And the point I was trying to make was that it didn't even go far enough that we should be paying higher prices. And you have to marvel at how the government has taken those same prices across the African region to make the argument that we are the lowest. Well, what you're trying to tell Nigerians is that your deregulation didn't even go far enough. Your removal of fuel prices, you are still subsidizing. This is a bad idea. If you are going to reform, you must go all the way. President Tinubu has caved into pressure. He has caved into people who have been saying that, this is the increasing fuel prices is bad. And now the markets are going to react to this the same way the markets reacted to Petrobras. And please, my colleagues, let us end this argument about refineries. Refineries are good. Refineries assist you with domestic production. Refineries do not take you back to prices of subsidy era prices. Brazil has refineries. America has refineries. All these countries, the US is now worried about rising petrol prices. America has strategic petroleum reserves that they pump into the market to try to augment prices.
Which is a
they
subsidy.
are still worried. It's not a subsidy because the market is deregulated. So look, the thing is this. We have backtracked now, only halfway into removing fuel subsidy. I've been consistent. I've said the subsidy. Look, I drive an SUV. It cost me 50,000 naira to fill my car. It used to be 15,000 naira. Do you think I'm happy to pay those prices? Of course I'm not. But Nigeria's fiscal structure cannot handle fuel subsidies. Please go ahead. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Keep it brief so that other people can
go.
I'm done.
Real quickly. The argument has always been, you see, the textbook argument neoclassical economists make is always textbook. But the problem they fail to realize is there's a difference between textbook analogy and what's the reality on ground. You are saying reforms. You are saying prices are not far enough. In an economy where NNPC has not even been clear with people. No subsidy removal. Subsidy didn't go anywhere in the first place. Let's not deceive ourselves. You are saying free market forces. NNPC was the major importer and controlling prices. You are saying you talk to a marketer. The marketer told you they will increase price. And everybody waits for NNPC to increase price. Have you ever asked that in a free market, why will somebody be the one to be leading? So there's insincerity in the NNPC in the first place. You are easily comparing NNPC to Petrobras. You want to say the level of governance that apply in Petrobras compares with NNPC? It's not done. From day one, there's a lot of lies, error in this system in the first place. And that's why we keep going round in circles. And for the nations you are talking about, Rotus, there's also a payment of subsidies. Brazil just stopped subsidies in 2022. Even Ivory Coast that they put in there pays about 2% of their GDP on fuel subsidies. So the chart itself is wrong in the first place. And that's what a lot of people are calling for. A lot of us said in 2012 would have been the best time to remove subsidies because at least you still have the parameters to carry it. You had reserves. Reserve was topping close to billions then, over 30, 40 billion. But we are saying the dishonesty of the NNPC is a big problem. So if you are saying all of this, what we are saying is that the NNPC and government in this regard are not being truthful to the people. Pure and simple. So you don't expect market forces to happen in an economy where erotic boju lies are too much. As at now, we now know.
Okay, can we have the next?
No, let me just land on this point, Dr. Boati. As at today, we now know that subsidy is still going on because the landing cost is 651 and the pump price cost is 580. So subsidy is still on. It didn't go anywhere before.
So
like this, like this they says.
No, let's have the next person.
Please, let other people make the argument.
Go ahead.
Because when you compare Nigeria with countries like the other African countries, you also have to look at the argument that's been made is that we are an oil-producing nation, and so the conversation, and so whether you like because the reality is not, it doesn't make sense, whether economic sense or layman sense, that we produce a commodity and we still have to compare ourselves with in terms of prices that others who do not produce pay. I think that's the argument in this instance. And then you yourself have talked about the bad implementation of a policy that ought to have worked. So initially when the president came out and said that subsidy is gone, many people were for it because World Bank, IMF had said that for a more sustainable economy, we had to do away with subsidy. However, we've seen that policy implementation is a big challenge. It wasn't well thought out. There was no there was no plan to cushion the effect on Nigerians. It does not reflect the reality of the purchasing power of Nigerians. Yes, you're saying that we're not paying enough because the question, what I'm hearing, is that are you saying that they should increase the price of petrol to reflect the true state if they deregulate it? We can't afford it. The poverty levels.
Nigeria in 2022 spent $10 billion on fuel subsidies. We do not. There are two things that determine prices, and when you say compared to other countries, it is a global. Hold on. It is a global market. Crude oil is sold in dollars. Look, Mr. Ifeni grows bananas in his backyard. You want to buy a banana from Mr. Ifeni? He brought bananas to the office. Will Mr. Ifeni sell it to give you a free banana or sell it under the price because he grows it in his backyard? There's a market for fruits, but there's a cost. So one second, doctor. Nigeria is facing a debt crisis. You cannot afford fuel subsidies. So pick one. Either we go and turn into Sri Lanka, or you say that you want you want to alleviate pressure for people. You have to pick one.
Okay. So there is nothing to be emotional about. If any may be growing banana in his
at what cost?
Not in commercial quantities. Maybe as a survival strategy. If everything fails, he will take banana and take account.
It's a market. Bananas have a market price.
Yeah, I know. But that one is for survival reasons. Let him eat banana like monkey. That is his own. Anyway, what is the issue here? You cited the example of Kenya. You said Kenya is not an example that we should be citing. No, the point, I thought you were responding to the point I made earlier about William Ruto changing his mind about the removal of fuel subsidy. Now, the theoretical point, as a student of policy evaluation, I must have spoken about policy evaluation in this place, many times, not out of, whim, because I read the books. So the thing is, if a policy is not working, if a policy is punishing your people, look at Kenya. You yourself brought the story here. The Kenyan people, when they saw that they were suffering, they were having protests 3 days a week. People were dying because of a policy that was not working. And as a result, you now have the same William Ruto, who was part of the policy that he reversed, now saying that, look, no, this is not working, so we will give you a respite till September 26th. He wants to reconsider. my point is that if you see that a certain policy is punishing the people, don't treat the people with arrogance. Policy making, policy formulation is about changing the social system. It's about changing the conditions of the people. So it will amount to pure arrogance or dictatorship or what Pastor Bakari called imperial presidency for you to say it is my way or it is the highway, even when the people are suffering. So, the theory is different from the reality. Can you match theory with reality and then reconsider? So if President Tinubu comes tomorrow and he says, well, we are trying to tinker with this subsidy thing, I will not be surprised, because it's only when the people are happy that you are legitimate as their leader. That's number one point. Russia. I talked about Russia. Russia increased interest rate by 350 basis points. This is not the first time that they will do it. And I was citing Russia as an example of a country where the sanctions are hitting hard, because Russia now has a balance of trade crisis. So where does that leave Putin? Because, okay, they tried to, the ruble is weak, they increased rates, it has not made any difference. The ruble is still very weak against the dollar. So, and I was saying that the argument that, if you stay in a position, you can stay with it. No, it doesn't always work like that. And I'm curious that in Russia, the Central Bank of Russia is now saying their inflation target is 4%. I was looking for 2% in the various reports. After all, 2% is supposed to be proverbial, but nobody is talking about 2%. And as for the US, Fitch is saying that it will downgrade banks, the major banks. Now, the financial stocks fell immediately. All the banks, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, they lost money. And the regional banks are also likely to be affected. After all, sometimes people say, oh, all these rating agencies, what they say does not matter. Yeah. But we've seen one instance here that it matters. But should it be a source of worry? Considering the fact that retail figures, which you announced, will come out this week on Monday. Those retail figures have not been announced. The retail figures have done very well. Consumer spending in the US looks like it's going to help economic growth. Yeah. And finally, maybe I was off key at a point. You didn't talk about inflation figures in Nigeria. Now at 24.08%.
Yeah, the numbers are there, yeah.
Yes,
there
it looks like it will get worse. Headline inflation, the worst in 10 years. These are the things that government should be worrying about, to make it easy for us. The Chartered Institute of Bankers, they had a press conference yesterday. They want to do Bankers Night, a pepper soup and jollof party for distinguished bankers in Lagos. The chairman of the branch was saying, look, Nigeria is the only country I have seen where a money float is not working. And we have been saying it here. What are they managing? Which float are they managing?
Yeah, I get you.
Shonubi, the CBN governor, he came around, he was talking like he has no idea of basic economics. He says he's going to introduce something next week. What is he introducing? So these are the kind of issues, we should be interrogating. Instead of the president has affirmed, the president is concerned. No, they are not affirming anything. They are not concerned about anything. They are advertising confusion. That is my point. And don't be defending them when they are advertising confusion. So you want them to increase fuel price more so that we can suffer.
Okay, but doctor, if you pay for fuel subsidies, right, the money that you use to do that gives you you're less inclined to defend your currency, right? Because you are putting more money into subsidizing fuel. Look, you have to. It's either A or B. So if you, it's A or B.
Find a C because A and B is
But
not
the
working.
truth is, you have to survive now.
Yeah.
You have to survive now. And all of this is happening when the same people, when it was the right time that we had all the buffers, the forex, the reserves to do it, these same people said no. They went on the streets in Lagos and in Ojota. They called President Jonathan all sorts of names. That would have been the Chinese say the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is now.
True, but we are where we are. There's no need to say back when you should have done this.
Don't worry.
So you just have to do it. There's no choice.
720 you want, even 800 will be good.
It's not about what I want. It's about the health of the Nigerian economy and the fiscal structure of government.
Time will tell.
Anyway, thank you very much,
Thank you so much, Doctor.